What if the biggest secrets of humanity aren't hidden in encrypted files or classified vaults, but right in front of us, buried beneath layers of time, silence, and deliberate forgetting? Not because they're impossible to find, but because they're too dangerous to accept, too disruptive to the story we've been told. Today, we're not talking about myths, not conspiracy theories spun from thin air, but about real discoveries. Artifacts, structures, documents, and human stories that have been found, studied, and often quietly buried again. Not by sand or soil, but by institutions, politics, and fear. These are the finds they don't want you to think too deeply about, because once you do, nothing looks the same. Let's start with something that grows, literally. In the forests of northern Germany, hidden among the pines and firs, is a symbol most of the world tried to erase: the swastika. But this isn't graffiti. It's not spray paint on a wall. It's a forest. In the 1930s, someone planted 140 fir trees in the shape of a perfect Nazi emblem. And here's the chilling part. You can't see it from the ground, only from the air, only from a helicopter or a satellite. This was a long-term engineering project, a message carved into the landscape, designed to last decades, meant to survive the fall of a regime. After the war, after the Third Reich collapsed, the trees kept growing. And in the 1990s, when aerial surveys revealed the structure in Uckermark, Germany, authorities panicked. They started cutting them down. Why? Not because the trees were dangerous, but because the idea was. Because fans, neo-Nazis, and curious tourists might come, pay homage, and turn it into a shrine. But here's the irony. Every time they cut the trees, new ones grow back. The symbol reappears. It's not just a relic. It's a living ideology rooted in the earth. And that's terrifying, because it shows that ideas once planted don't die. They evolve, they adapt, they survive. Now let's go to Myanmar, to a story that sounds like legend, but is confirmed by historical records. In 1484, King Dhamazedi ordered the casting of the largest bell ever made. Weighing over 290 tons, it hung at the Shwedagon Pagoda, one of the holiest Buddhist sites in the world. But in 1608, a Portuguese mercenary, Felipe de Brito, captured Yangon and decided to melt the bell down for weapons. He loaded it onto a barge to transport it across the Bago River, but he miscalculated the weight. The barge capsized, the bell sank. And despite countless attempts over centuries, divers, sonar, even modern submersibles, it has never been found. Not in the river, not in the delta, not in the ocean. It's still down there somewhere, beneath layers of silt. A silent monument to greed, power, and cultural destruction. And yet the story lives on. In Myanmar, the Great Bell of Dhamazedi is more than a lost artifact. It's a symbol of national pride, a reminder that even when you destroy a people's heritage, their memory of it remains unbroken. Now consider this. What if the first metal humans ever worked with didn't come from the ground, but from the sky? In Turkey, archaeologists discovered a 4,700-year-old amulet made of meteoritic iron. Found in a Bronze Age burial site in Kesiktepe, it's one of the oldest confirmed meteorite artifacts in the world. And it's not alone. In Egypt, beads made of cosmic iron date back to 3300 BC. In Russia's Orenburg region, Yamnaya culture graves contain tools forged from meteorites. Why? Because ancient people knew this wasn't ordinary iron. It was rare. It didn't rust like terrestrial metal. It was harder, shinier, almost magical. And they associated it with the divine, because it fell from the heavens like fire. This wasn't just technology, it was theology. They weren't just smiths, they were priests of the sky, and this changes everything. It means early humans weren't just scavenging rocks. They were observing, analyzing, and selecting materials with intention. They had a relationship with the cosmos long before we had telescopes. Now let's go to Baalbek, Lebanon. You've probably heard of the Roman temples there: Jupiter, Venus, Bacchus. But what you haven't been told is this. The Romans didn't build the foundation, they built on top of it. Beneath the Roman ruins lies a platform of megaliths, so massive they defy explanation. One of them, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs over 1,000 tons. And it's still in the quarry. It was never used. Nearby, 2 other stones, each over 1,000 tons, were somehow moved and placed into the structure. How? In the 21st century, the heaviest crane can lift about 5,000 tons, but only under perfect conditions. In the ancient world? No wheels, no pulleys capable of that force, No recorded civilization had this technology, and yet, here it is, carved, transported, and positioned with precision. Some claim the Romans did it, but the platform predates them by centuries, possibly millennia. So who built it, and why did they stop? The truth is we don't know, and that silence speaks volumes, because when science can't explain something, it doesn't investigate. It dismisses. It calls it myth. It moves on. Now let's talk about Katyn. In 1943, German troops discovered mass graves in the Katyn Forest near Smolensk. Thousands of Polish officers executed with shots to the back of the head. The Nazis announced it to the world, claiming Soviet guilt. The USSR denied it, blaming the Germans. But here's the twist. At the Nuremberg trials, Hermann Göring and Alfred Jodl, top Nazi leaders, were indicted for the Katyn massacre. That's right. The official Allied narrative at the time blamed the Nazis. But decades later, Soviet archives opened, and there it was, a signed order from Stalin, Molotov, and other Politburo members, authorizing the execution of 22,000 Polish prisoners. The truth was buried for 50 years. Not because it was unknown, but because it was inconvenient. The USSR was an ally. Exposing the truth would have shattered the wartime alliance, so the lie was maintained. And anyone who questioned it, journalists, historians, survivors, was silenced. Some died under mysterious circumstances. Documents vanished. The lesson: truth isn't always buried by the enemy. Sometimes it's buried by your friends. Now let's go to Russia. Because what if I told you there are pyramids there, older than Egypt's? In 2001, on the Kola Peninsula, researchers discovered a pyramidal structure dated to twice the age of the Giza complex. In Crimea, 7 pyramids were found in a straight line between Sevastopol and Foros, estimated to be 2,000 years older than their Egyptian counterparts. In Rostov-on-Don, the sanctuary of Arius predates the pyramids of Giza by a full millennium, and was built according to the Golden Ratio. In Krasnoyarsk, the Black Sopka volcano has stepped masonry that looks artificial, like Mesoamerican pyramids. And yet, you've never heard of them? Why? Because they don't fit the narrative. The story we've been sold is that Egypt was the cradle of pyramid building, but what if it wasn't? What if pyramid construction was a global phenomenon, a shared technology from a lost civilization? And what if the Egyptians were just inheritors, not inventors? And speaking of lost civilizations, what about the Maya? We're told they disappeared, but they didn't. Their descendants still live in Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. They speak Mayan languages, wear traditional clothes, practice ancient rituals. What vanished was the political structure, the cities, the centralized power, the writing system. The collapse was sudden. No gradual decline. One day the great cities were full. The next, they were abandoned. Why? The official story blames environmental collapse, deforestation, drought, overpopulation. But could it be something else? What if they chose to leave? What if they walked into the jungle, not as refugees, but as survivors of a system that had failed? And what if they're waiting, not to return with armies, but with knowledge, when the world is ready to listen again? Now consider this. In Ireland, archaeologists used LIDAR to scan the landscape and discovered 5 massive structures called cursuses, long, narrow pathways stretching up to 400 meters. They're aligned with the solstices and equinoxes, and they lead to burial sites. These weren't roads for the living. They were paths for the dead, ritual corridors guiding souls to the afterlife. No artifacts were found near them. No tools, no weapons, no offerings. Just the paths. And they've lasted for 5,000 years. This wasn't just burial practice. It was cosmology, a map of the soul's journey. And it was invisible until technology revealed it. Which makes you wonder, how many other ancient structures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right tool, the right moment to be seen? And then there's the cursed table. In Virginia City, Nevada, inside the Delta Saloon, a 170-year-old poker table sits under glass behind a fence. Why? Because according to legend, everyone who played at it met tragedy. First, it was in a faro casino. Players lost everything. Then it went to a man named Blackjack. He lost his fortune and killed himself. Then to David Lips. His entire family was found dead at the table. It passed from owner to owner, each meeting disaster. Eventually, the current owner locked it away, But one day someone unaware of the curse put it back into use, and the tragedies resumed. Is it real? Or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy, a psychological curse where belief becomes reality? Either way, the table remains, a monument to the power of myth. And what about the Dacian treasures? In January 2025, a golden helmet, belonging to a priest or chieftain of the Dacian culture, was stolen from a museum in the Netherlands. Along with 3 royal bracelets, it vanished. These artifacts weren't just jewelry. They were symbols of a civilization that resisted Rome, that had its own gods, its own knowledge. And now they're gone. Not lost to time, but to theft. And who benefits? The black market? A private collector? Or someone who wants to erase another piece of forgotten history? And then there's Hitler's jaw. For decades we've had theories. He escaped to Argentina, lived in a bunker, had a double. But in April 2024, the FSB released a photo, a jawbone in a cigarette box. 9 teeth. Forensic experts compared it to 1944 dental records. The match was perfect. Traces of cyanide on the prosthetics. The suicide story? Confirmed. The myth? Dead. And yet, why did it take 80 years to confirm? Why were the remains hidden in an archive? Because sometimes the truth is less exciting than the legend, and legends sell better. And what about the woman once believed to be a pregnant mummy in Warsaw? CT scans showed what looked like a fetus. Sensational headlines followed. But reanalysis proved it was mummification residue. Tissue clots, not a baby. The cancer diagnosis? Also false. Damage from brain extraction. The mystery remains, but the drama is gone. And that's the problem. Real science is slow, careful, unglamorous, but the world wants miracles. These finds, these truths, aren't being erased because they're fake. They're being ignored because they're inconvenient, because they challenge the timeline. They disrupt the narrative. They suggest that history isn't a straight line of progress, but a series of rises and falls, of civilizations that reached heights we can't explain and then vanished. So the real question isn't, what are they hiding? It's, why don't we want to see?